shared last night, and he's going to repeat some of that this morning, so we look forward to that. Anyways, Joel McCall and Sarah McCall, they are missionaries. They represent ELI, which is Equipping Leaders International. So discipleship to the degree where it's equipping pastors instead of just regular church members. So what a tremendous job, and it is in 3 countries in Africa: Congo, Uganda, and Rwanda. I'll get it right here in a minute here. So we look forward to Joel coming and talking with us, and he's also going to preach during the sermon. So Joel,
Amen.
I thought that was a pretty good.
All
All right, here we go. It's all yours.
You mentioned Jonah and Jennifer. I talked to them on Sunday, and he was thrilled to find out I was going to be here at Harvest because he loves the church. You know that, and he thinks very highly of all of you. I want to just kind of walk through an overview of some of what I do, and I know there are some people who have not heard it, and so some of this I may have shared in the past in terms of the overview of what we do. And then I'll just share some pictures. Can I pray? Lord, would you be glorified in everything that I do here in sharing what you have done through ELI. And I pray, God, that you will richly bless Harvest and all the leaders and all the members here, that you will cause them to take great heart in what they're doing here locally and through their missionaries. And thank you for their standing with us, God. It has been a great encouragement to Sarah and I to know the love and the faithfulness and the support that they have given us. May you be honored in Jesus' name. Amen. Okay, Equipping Leaders International, and the next one there. I threw this in just before I left. My last trip to Uganda, if I've learned anything about Africa, you better expect the unexpected. Now, I'm not kidding you. I have seen, that's the only time I've ever seen a motorcycle on a motorcycle, but I've seen caskets on motorcycles. I've seen beds sideways, and we try to figure out, how do you get that thing balanced on it and drive down the road, you know? And, I mean, you see everything. I saw a cow. He was tied down on the back seat, and the guy's driving down the road. Cow didn't look happy, but, huh? Oh, yeah, chickens. Yeah, in fact, I need to tell this. This is funny. There was a guy who went with us to Uganda the one and only time he went, but he had a ball. It was great, and that motorcycle, they call those boda-bodas. That's an African's version of a taxi. Now I know when you travel in other countries, you see the same thing, but this guy, I kept telling him all week, I said, listen, you can't be a Ugandan unless you ride a boda-boda. There's no way in the world. Now, I've ridden motorcycles for years. He was not going to get on a two-wheeler, and especially the way they drive. And so all week long, I harassed him. Well, it was in the second week. We're driving through Kampala, that is a mega city, where you literally could reach over and shake the hand of the guy in the vehicle next to you. Here comes a boda-boda where it stands still, and here comes a boda-boda going slowly past us, and my friend Al is in the front seat. And just as they're right there, I look down, and there are chickens tied to the back seat. There are 2 adults on it, and then chickens. The chickens are 3 deep, live chickens, in a U shape. I don't know how they did it, but they had them tied so chickens are riding like that. And, and I'm looking at them right there. And as they come by, I said, hey, Al, even chickens will ride a boda-boda. But he came right back and said, I'm not a chicken. So he got me, all right. What was meant as an insult? No. The next slide, it is I wanted to highlight the fact that God is moving, and every time I go back, I never forget that. The next one, that was taken in Uganda, and this next one, basically, go back just to that one. It says, what do I do? I'm praying that the Lord will bring somebody from your church to go with me. I don't want you just to send me. I want someone to go with me. If you know the scriptures and you can teach, you come. Okay? I take teams of gifted teachers to pastors and leaders who have no access to outside training, and my hope is that maybe Christ will call you. So if you feel a nudge, just let me know, and we can talk and see if it's a good plan for you. The next one is going to show some pictures. Just a battery pictures. That guy you see sitting at the table, we are sitting in Rwanda on the border of the Democratic Republic of Congo. I cannot take teams in there because a civil war that has killed 6 million people is still going on. And now ISIS is operating in there. So we get right up on the border, and the big gentleman, Dave Forbes is his name. He's gone with me to Rwanda. I don't know. I quit counting. 8 times, 6 times. I have no idea. But he is faithful, and God uses him. He's an elder in the church. I'm in Knoxville. The guy sitting across from him is the fella Teofil Rugabira is his name. And Teofil is a guy I've worked with over a decade. I knew he was a keeper when I first met him through another African leader out of Uganda. This man knows how to delegate and how to equip and train. And when the genocide was over, Teofil, the guy on the right, he left the Congo, came there while the bodies were still in the street, and he started ministry to pastors to disciple and train them. And so God graciously connected me with him. The guy sitting in the middle you can barely see is our translator. That guy is me. Don't throw stones, please. Next one. I take teams with me. Now that guy he's a retired Air Force pilot. Had a career in Air Force, and then has gone on to do many other things. But Ray Morgan is his name. He is involved in our church, and he has gone with me, I don't know how many times, to Uganda, and the same kind of thing. He's got a gift, and he uses it for the glory of Christ. And so that was up on the border of South Sudan, northern Uganda, and we're doing a ministry there and teaching pastors. Next one. Those are just other examples. You notice my wife, she's holding up a puppet. Can you see that, upper right? No, upper left, I'm sorry. Okay. And so you can see a number of folks. We took teams there one time to minister in teaching not just pastors, but Sunday school teachers. And Sarah discovered that well into the week, one of the Sunday school teachers said, we don't have Bibles. So how do we teach Sunday school? They did not have Bibles, and they were doing the best they could with what they had. And so we began a ministry to them to get Bibles, to put Bibles in their hands, okay? I mean, it's just, it's incredible, isn't it? You just imagine a world like that. Next one. This is, now I don't know if you can play the video or not, but this is an African American who is a leader, elder in our church in Knoxville, and he has gone with me a number of times. And he is, you never know what you're going to end up doing. But we were approached. There's a Muslim who owns this radio station, and he is a politician, but he's Muslim, but he honors Christians by letting them every Sunday morning early broadcast into the DR Congo. And I don't know if you can catch any of this or not. I don't know if it'll come out. It's not a big deal if it doesn't. Okay, well then, we'll move on. That's fine. He gave a great message, and actually it came up in a session meeting here just last week, and he talked about that event. Next one. Of course, the scriptures are our focus. And it's not unusual that Africans who become pastors will only typically have had 4 weeks of training. So just imagine you're a pastor who's only had 4 weeks of training, now coming, starting this church, and ministering with whatever he was able to glean. And he's jumping in with both feet and doing the best he can. And so these brothers and sisters love Jesus, but that's what our niche is. We don't go to all the flashy places. We get on their turf. We go to remote places, but don't think of remote as not populated. There's a lot of people in them there hills, and they come in. And once we start doing this, we keep working in the same area. So the scriptures, that was a picture I took across the conference we were teaching. Okay, the next one. This is the guy I mentioned, Teofil Rugabira. He is a national leader. When I walk through the capital of Kigali, Rwanda, I feel like I'm walking with Billy Graham. Everybody comes up and talks to him, and not because he's got a big head, but because he's got a humble heart. And he just ministers, and his passion, and I've seen him stay the course for 11 years, is to train and equip pastors, and not just from his own denomination. He turned to me one day, we're sitting in a room with about 150 pastors. He said, "Joel, this is incredible." He said, "Before we started doing this, and Eli started working with us," he said, "these guys didn't talk to each other. They, Baptists, you have some Anglicans out there from DRC. They all were doing their own thing." And he said, because of this training, they not only have come together and become friends, they're talking to each other, they're learning from each other. And he said, this is unique in the African scene. Okay, next one. That's me, and I mentioned that guy who is my translator. His name is Stephen. And Stephen, when I first started going there, he knew some stuff about Reformed theology, but he didn't agree with it. We're teaching through Romans. We're doing this for twice over a 2-year, 4 times. First half of Romans, first year, second half of Romans. So we were running 4 conferences working through Romans. He's the translator. Now, you can't read Romans and not believe in the sovereignty of God or particular atonement that's effective. You can't do that. And so when we come to those texts, we deal with it. And so over lunch, he was espousing what I would consider to be a pretty thoroughgoing Arminian view. And we talked. Well, about the second year, he turns to me, you know how when you sit down for lunch, you end up talking, really talking. And he turns to me, and this guy enunciated the 5 points clearly than any RTS graduate I've ever heard. He got it. And not in a narrow way. That has not changed his ministry in who he's reaching out to. What it's done is it's enhanced it. So that's Stephen. He's both a pastor and a translator. We have a lot of fun with him, but we've been working together probably for 8 years. Okay, next. Those are just shots of the Congolese pastors while we're teaching. The next one, we're turning to the dark side of the history of Rwanda. That the Rwandan church was indeed birthed in hardship, and 100 days that the genocide, when it began and when it ended, they beat the Nazis for a world record in killing more people quicker. And so they had murdered with machetes, mainly, 1 million people in a small country. And they would do stuff to actually cripple you in the leg just to watch you die over a period of days. It was incredibly horrifying and brutal. And it was neighbor on neighbor. It even was so pressed that it was not unusual before that time for men and women to marry one another from the two different groups of the Hutu, the Tutsi. And so when the genocide started, they would come and find out if your wife was a Tutsi, they would say to you, you have to murder her. And if you don't, we're going to kill her, and then we're going to kill you. So many of them many of them, of course, refused, but many did. Now, just try to imagine in this community if that had happened in about every other household across this city. And so the destruction of the religious and Christian fabric, the civil fabric of that country, they call it the land of the walking wounded. And I prayed for a few years before I was able to get in there after the genocide, but God finally opened that door, and I never looked back. So those are pictures, those skulls are from the Genocide Memorial. Next one. That's a letter that I cannot read and you can't read, but written in Kinyarwanda that says that this church is closed. And one of the nights I arrived there, 4.5 years ago, the government suddenly, unannounced, never talked to the pastors and the Christian leadership of Rwanda. They suddenly announced new laws, and they started closing churches while we were doing our conference. In fact, they came in and walked around while we were actually conducting one of our conferences. And they were in a state of shock, and they still are. All that to say that Rwanda has, coming August 31st of this year, this is the 5th year since they enacted these laws, and if they don't relent, and they've shown no signs of it, they're going to kick 20,000 pastors out of ministry. So it would be like you're coming and Scott, you're not pastor. You cannot preach a sermon anymore because you don't have an accredited degree. That's the deal. And if you do, you're going to be locked up in jail, and who knows what's going to happen to you after that. So imagine what would happen to the church if he was taken out. And that's what I'm dealing with now. And I've been dealing with this for going on 5 years, but now it's imminent. So a lot of the pastors are moving to Uganda and Tanzania border countries, but some of them are choosing to stay. Next picture. The question, why should world missions include a focus on leaders? Look at this next one. That's a graph that shows from 1900s to approaching 2025. Do you see how the church has been growing exponentially there? And the red line is America, North America. So you see, we were climbing in statistically as churches in America, but notice how it started plateauing. And what is that? That's 2009, and it's probably showing decline at this point. So that's technically probably outdated. But notice the other ones. Notice the Asia, that would include China, and notice what's happening in Africa. It's going through the roof. And for years, I've seen somewhere in the range of 20,000 to 30,000 coming into the churches in sub-Sahara Africa every single day, and you heard that right. And that has shown no signs of letting up, and I've had those numbers confirmed to me. In fact, my numbers are low by missiologists. Okay, next picture. So what do? I'm going to just go on to the next one. Pretty well. They're planting 4,000 churches a week in sub-Sahara Africa. I'm not talking northern Africa where Islam is, but Islam, the gospel is exploding among the Muslims. Traditional methods of discipleship and leadership training cannot keep up with what's going on. Here's very simply what we're watching. It's like the early church in Acts. Sometimes you see Paul write letters and you go, well, they were acting like that and they were behaving that way. Well, what's wrong with them? And then you're in church ministry, you know what Paul's talking about. Well, it's murky at times. People believe the wrong stuff when they come to Christ, and it takes a while to root that stuff out. That's called discipleship. And so that's tough. Well, out of this, they can't afford to go to seminary or Bible college. They don't have access to it. We do. They don't. And so as a result of that, if you're planting in the neighborhood of those kinds of numbers of churches every week, 5,000 churches, how many churches are in the PCA? You know, Scott?
I do not know.
Imagine that. Now, they're not big churches like we're used to, but they become that, many of them. And so doesn't take many smarts. These are the grandchildren, the spiritual grandchildren of the missionaries who went from England and from America into Africa. And when they went there back then, late 1800s, early 1900s, you took your casket with you because you knew you weren't coming home. Seriously, they shipped them over there. And so these are the grandchildren of those who gave their lives in missions. And so now my question is, are we engaging with them, or are we walking past them to plant our own Reformed churches? We need both. We need to do both. But we also need to give attention, and so that's what we do. We're Reformed guys, but we open the scriptures and plow. You don't need to give them the names. You just simply need to give them the biblical content, and they change. Okay, next one.
1,700 churches as well.
1,700. Well, how long would it take planting 4,000 churches a week? 5,000 churches. Okay, you get the picture. And so Paul, when Paul wrote this in his last letter he wrote before he got his head chopped off, he said that the things you have seen and heard from me, that you are to give to other faithful people. And that's what he's after, and that's what we're trying. That's what I'm trying to do. That's what ELI does. By the way, we're all over Africa, and we're involved in India, up to our eyeballs in India. There is a major explosion of Christianity in India. We're probably mentoring the leaders of probably about 20,000 churches, and it just keeps growing. And in India, the leader of India is kicking missionaries out, but we by God's grace got in there, got a denomination, if you will, a new denomination. Licensed, approved by the state before this dictator, and he can't kick them out, and he can't stop the church. Next one. Okay, so next one here, just overall strategy. There's a thing called MINTS, which is Miami International Seminary out of South Florida. They were big in South America and Central America, and they connected with ELI, and so we partner with them. in both offering degree programs all over. And then the second step down, and this is where I'm focused. I've taught for Mintz, but I've focused on what's called certified course instructors. And what that means is, and then you see the next one, developing new fields, large-sized groups. I used to go in and do a lot of stuff, 300 pastors, 250 pastors typically. That's good, but we've learned, and COVID fast-forwarded this for us. We've learned we can actually reach more by going smaller. And so we find leaders in an area that are really proven and tested. We give them this content and interact with them for a longer period of time, and then they go out and teach it to their peers. And that's how we're seeing the real dramatic multiplication. It's really what Paul did, and it's what Jesus did. Next one. These, I'm going to run through these. Those are just pictures of the large teaching sessions, so you can keep running through these. You can see there an example. That's in Uganda. You can see that's on the border of the DR Congo, where when we teach CCIs, we then have them in the process of the week break into small groups and discuss among themselves what they heard. And then one of the guys will stand up from the group and he will summarize what he just heard. That allows us to know what we hope we're saying is what they're getting. And so it has been very effective. And then they, in regional accountability groups, they will then go out as like groups of 2 or 3, and they will teach their own people. So it's a multiplication, but it's far quicker and more effective than me going and just living there as an American. Okay, next one. I'm going to skip over that. All that's a memorial to the Holocaust, and the lady who was standing next to me in that picture lost her husband, came back from their honeymoon, and the genocide was just opening up, and they captured her husband, killed him in jail, and she had to go into hiding. She ended up in Hotel Rwanda. If you've seen the movie, she was one of the ones who the UN hauled out. Next one. Those are other pictures. You see them holding Bibles. And I mentioned what Sarah, they discovered that the Congolese guys were running Sunday school without a Bible. And so we've probably put in the hands of pastors, I'm going to say probably 2,500, 3,000 Bibles. Yes, study Bibles. The reason for study Bibles is obvious. Your study Bible has a commentary at the bottom of the page. And imagine if you just had a Bible, and they would not have, if they did have a Bible, they wouldn't have a Bible with cross-references. You can't do word studies. You can't look stuff up. And so translations have been accomplished in the last decade that have put study Bibles out there. So we've raised the funds and we just routinely pass them out. Next one. That's in a UN camp in southern Uganda. We went in and did something rather unusual by going into the UN camp. Those are the Hutus who were the killers involved in the genocide. So they fled Rwanda when it fell back to some normal government, and the genocide was stopped. These are the guys who have no country, and so they're still to this day living in the UN camp, and they're ministering to their own people. So we went in and actually taught those who are now pastoring churches in the UN camp, we taught the scriptures to them. That's what that is. Next one. I'll keep going. There's another brother who's teaching from a church up in Pennsylvania. They've come with me many times to Rwanda. Next one. The certified course instructor training. If you'll go to the next slide, this is this is an example of where in the large group, I would typically do the large group. The next one, I then begin to focus on going deeper with fewer, because there can be more interaction and you can find out what they're really thinking and clarify and what have you. Next one, I'll keep going. What do these leaders say? And I gather we can't hear what they say. If there's an embedded video there? No? Okay. We'll skip through these. What they basically said in these testimonies, one of them was the wife of a bishop. And we went, this lady here, we went on the border of the DR Congo, and this guy's a spiritual leader in his community. And so we come back and we do a conference on marriage. And I mean, we really get beneath the surface on this. We talk about everything from Genesis to, Ephesians. We talk about sex. We talk about love. We talk about what it looks like. And we talk about God's plan for marriage. And it's so funny. At the end, when she gives her testimony, she said to her husband, "Honey, this is what I've been telling you all this time." Don't you love it? Humanity's the same everywhere we go. Amen. Now, ladies, don't use that on your husband today, okay? Go easy, will you? But seriously, I mean, we just simply laid out the scriptures. And at one point, when you get to talking about sex in the context of marriage, and you show God's design for it, sometimes they raise their hands and say, it's not polite in African society to talk about sex. So we just smile and we say, we understand that and we respect that you need to be appropriate, but my brothers and sisters, God talks about it in the Bible. And if we don't talk about it in the church, trust me, your young kids are talking about it. They're on phones now. So we have to talk about it because God talks about it. And so there was a restoration of some marriages that were happening. And I've seen that over and over again. We do this quite often. Next one. This was a former pastor at the Knoxville church. Next one. I can't, because the video's not working, I can summarize what this brother says. He studied in medical technology. And he said, back when I started, we didn't have a way to test AIDS except by hand. And your risk was you nick yourself, you got it, bingo. And he said, so I worked in that field for years, but he said, I've gotten involved in ministry. He's an older gentleman. And he said, what I have learned today about disciple making, this has transformed my whole understanding. So we do a conference where we walk through how Jesus did disciple making and how it works. Next one. Those are some of the people who gathered for our large group training. And then I think the next one will be this was a certified course instructor training on marriage. I did this one last year with Ugandan pastors. Just a simple story. We're there. Now the bishop I worked with, he said, these were pastors he disciples and leads. And he said there's a couple who African marriage, they're still living on the compound. Mom steps into the marriage often, and his wife is resenting it and wants to move out. Leave and cleave, you violate that biblical principle, you're going to have problems. And so that's typical in Africa. And so we noticed, he told us about this couple, and you could tell there was tension. They sat right on the front row. And so we're working through the biblical stuff and using illustrations, what have you. They're looking at each other, and we made them break off. Everybody go outside. Now you face your wife and your husband. Now you talk about this question. Ooh, it was threatening. And you know something? There were some tears shed, and by about the third day, you could tell reconciliation had happened, and they were smiling and looking at each other. Next one. That was the oldest married couple in that training on the one side, and then you see the young couple. That's the youngest married couple. So both, we hit the young and the old in this conference. Next one. This is in Uganda, where I'm involved in a place called Jinja. Again, we break out and have discussion. Next one. This is an example of how we put material in their hands. We don't just teach them, because when these Mzungus have come back home, we want the effect to continue. So we put good works. We have a partnership now with Crossway Good News Publishers, who publishes the ESV. And they see the substance of ELI. They are giving us free theological works and Bibles. And so I will hold them over there, and other team members will, and we pass them out to the pastors and students we're teaching. And so they're just celebrating that one. That one was Concise Theology by J.I. Packer. Anybody know who J.I. Packer is? Of course you do. Next one. This was one of the last conferences I did in Rwanda, where you can kind of see, it's hard to see, I know it's a small picture, but you can see Teofil, the guy you saw earlier, and you can see the pastor sitting there. And I've been working with these guys. When I first started working with them, they would ask the most off-the-wall questions, like, I got a bishop who's cheating on his wife, and he's really abusive to the church members. What do I do with this guy? And you would get those kinds of situations, and we wanted them to stay focused on what we're looking at, because that's how you resolve those problems if you think biblically in terms of Christian leadership. So the questions have totally changed. Now they don't deal with the muck. We will tell them, no, you need to go talk to that guy, and you need to talk to your bishops, and you guys need to deal with that as Africans. We're not going to fix that for you, but you need to be biblically equipped and know how to deal with it. And so we're teaching there. Next one. This is something that fell into my lap. While I'm over in Rwanda, the guy you see in the blue comes to me, and the guy Dave Forbes had raised about $10,000, $15,000 to build a building to start a classes for children. And those children were going to end up in a Muslim school. Muslims are aggressively spreading Islam across Africa through their schools. And what they do is, with their petrodollars and their financing, they come in and they build schools, and then, since many of the Christian families are poverty-ridden, they'll say, how would you like your child to have free education? And so they end up sending their kids, and you know how the story ends on that. And so Teofil said, that's our problem we're having. So Dave Forbes raised the funds, and he ended up getting a building built. Well, they filled it up with 100 kids. And then he said we could use some more space, so we were going to go after adding another 1 or 2 classrooms to that. And then Teofil says, you know what? The Muslims are looking to buy the land adjacent to ours that are several houses, and they're natural classrooms. And we looked at each other and we prayed about it, and the Lord raised the money. We ended up buying all that land right from under the noses of the Muslims. And guess what that's going to become? Now the school's probably going to double or triple. And that's already being utilized now. And we're going to use one of those classrooms for our training of pastors. Next one. So it's really kind of neat. That's just pictures of it, you know. That's the church that Teofil, one of his churches that Teofil started. A quick story. When do I need to stop? Tell me when I need to stop.
Normally we stop at 10:15, but,
Okay, I'm almost
we give
done.
people a break in between worship and
Okay.
Sunday schools.
I'm almost done then. And that picture, just want to tell you a quick story. I'm in that church building, and a young woman and her mother stood up, and they have times of testimonies. And he stood up and she said, I just got married this past week. And she said, I was inside my mother. My mother was pregnant with me when the genocide broke out, and they killed my father and all my brothers and sisters, and said I was the only survivor only because I was in my mother's womb. But she said they tried to kill her and dumped her in a pit and left her for dead. She wasn't dead. And so she survived, as did Mom. And now here she is, a young woman, just got married. And she said, typically when you get married, your dad gives you away in Rwandan society. But she said, I didn't have any family. And then she smiled and she said, talking about in Jesus, she said, you are my family. You were there, a cheer broke out. That's Christianity. And in that church, you have Hutus and Tutsis now worshiping God together. That's what Christianity is all about, okay? All right, I think, I don't know how many more slides are left, but I can stop. Oh, I think this is the last one. What's coming on August 31st, I've been working on this for several years, and you've been a part of this, trying to get a school started, but I'm part of a bigger fellowship involving Reformed guys from Third Mill, from Ligonier Ministries. We get on the phone about once a month, and we're working on trying to develop this situation in East Africa, especially Rwanda. And so that is a school that funds have been raised for, and they've applied for accreditation. Now, whether they'll get it, I don't know. But we're putting our best foot forward. So I had the privilege of going over on my last trip to go visit that site, and it's impressive. And I hope to have future ministry with them. Okay? I'm going to stop there. Thank you for your love and your faithfulness and your prayers. I really appreciate this. So God bless all of you.
Amen. Are you having any questions?
Yeah, I am, if you want to.
Do you have any, on these Bibles that you're giving out, you said 2,500 or 3,000, are all those donated by Crossway, or do you need to raise funds for any special, things like that?
I don't have an answer to that right now because I don't know. I know Crossway has been helping me, but they've been helping the other staff. So I can get an answer to that and get back to you. But there are other Bibles that they're not publishing that we can put out there, like in Rwanda. The NIV notes of the study Bible were translated into the Rwandan language with the Rwandan text. In other words, it's Rwandan language, so it was based on the NIV, but really it's Rwandan language with Rwandan notes from the ESV, from the NIV study Bible, which are good notes. So those I can get for I think it's like $15 a Bible. So we give that out to Rwandan leaders and Congolese, and now an adjacent country as well. Yes.
The ESV is not your major
No, I
Crossways.
mean, well, we do in that case, so they have to be English readers, which limits the scope. But like the Kenya Rwandan version of the study Bible, so we have some Swahili Bibles we can buy. And all the time, publishers are working to put these study Bibles into local languages. So that's an evolving scene all the time. Yeah. All right.
Joel, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Make sure you talk to Joel, Sarah,